finally gotten to the stage of doing our galley tops. We have been living on the boat. We worked out in July, I think it was going to be 2 years. So we're a month away from having owned the boat for 2 years. But we wanted to do our galley tops last because we didn't want any damage during the rest of the work being carried out. And also we couldn't decide on what we were going to go with. It had always been our dream to go with Corian. In the beginning of the project, it was a done deal that it was going to be Corian. Budgetary restrictions have now changed that. Not so much only budget, but also the fact that installing Corian is a lot more complicated. We would probably have ended, to do the job properly, we probably would have had to have a professional installer, and that pretty much in South Africa doubles the price of the Corian itself. So it just worked out to be a very, very big expense that we couldn't really justify at this stage of the project. So then we started searching around for other options, and obviously Formica is a very common option. I don't know what it is that I've just been not keen on having the Formica. So Robin was searching around on the internet one day and came up with bamboo. And initially when bamboo first came to South Africa, it was very expensive. So I thought, well, that's going to end up being the same as Corian. But when we started researching, we found that it wasn't. It was about half the price of the Corian. So more expensive than Formica, but less than the Corian. So it was a bit of a nice middle ground. So we searched around. We had to find suppliers in Cape Town. Obviously came up with Bamboo Warehouse, who have been amazing. They've been a font of knowledge. Have spoken to us a lot about, we've asked about the weight and the water, you know, how hardy it's going to be on the countertops, and they've assured us that if it's sealed properly with the right sealers, there's no reason it shouldn't perform really well in the long run. It is eco-friendly, and their product is from sustainable sources, which is nice to do, and comes in a variety of different sizes. So we looked at obviously the very thin ones because keeping weight to a minimum is very important on the boat. So we had the thinnest is 2.2 mils, and they got a 5 mil. I think this was a 16 mil or 12 mil, and it goes right up to really thick countertops for domestic use. They also do flooring and wall paneling and a lot of furniture actually too, so it was really interesting to look into all that. We have ultimately decided to go with the 5 mil board. It has its pros and its cons. Very light. The boards themselves were 2.4 meters by 1.2, and each board weighed I've drawn a blank. I think it was 6 kgs or something like that. I'll check back and have a look. So really, really lightweight. So we're not adding a lot of weight to the boat by doing this. We also looked at the finishing of it. We were worried with all the teak in the boat that if we did wooden tops, it was going to look too woody and make it dark inside. So we toyed with the idea of whitewashing, so that it ultimately ended up like a midway between the cupboards and the rest of the teak. We thought, well, we might whitewash the boards and then seal them. After doing a little sample, we really didn't like what that looked like. So then we went, I got some polyurethane varnish and I did a sample on that, and we figured that might actually be quite nice. So that is the finish we've decided to go with. One of the things we've discovered, because last week Robin started templating and cutting down the boards to this shape, to the shape of the galley, and I did 2 coats of polyurethane varnish on it before we've even started sticking, because I wanted to protect the surface before we started getting greasy fingerprints or Seco or whatever on it. And we have noticed that between the different boards we have a little bit of a color difference, so we're going to have a spot or two where we're doing joins that the color is not going to be a perfect match, which is a bit sad, but it is what it is. We didn't want to go back and have to buy more boards to change that. We're going to try and work it into the design, and it should be okay. Initially, when we started living in the boat, we knew we couldn't just live with raw wood countertops, and we were trying to find something that was cleanable but not permanent. And we found this vinyl, which looked really nice when we first put it in. It's looking really manky now. And we just put it over our main work surfaces just to protect them a bit, knowing that it was going to be a while before we came to changing the tops. So I'm not going to be sorry to see the back end of these today. That's going to be very nice. When we bought the boat, the basic cupboard had been built, and we had this marine ply underneath, and that's why we've been able to go with the 5mm top board instead of going thicker with the bamboo, because we've got this as a really good sturdy base. So we really are just laminating the countertops on at this stage. We are also going to do splashbacks along here, so I haven't quite decided yet whether the bamboo will go in that way or that way. Probably that way. So that will continue around here. Finish that off nicely. We have this wall behind the stove, which has been a lot of debate in the house, on the boat. I did paint it brown a little while ago, thinking that the color change might be quite nice, and we definitely don't like that. So I'm going to go with white. Ultimately, I might try and find a nice vinyl tile, stick-on tile, again to keep the weight down. If I can find something, then we'll do that there and make that a bit of pop of color. This is a piece of board that Robin cut last week, almost cut to size. We've obviously still got to shape everything, and it shows the color. What we were, when we bought the board unvarnished, that's the color. It's vastly different. I do have my reservations now about whether, when all these countertops are in, it's going to look like too much wood. And there is a little bit of a variation between the board that we've cut for here and there. That variation was not very obvious until I did the coat of varnish. So we will wait to see till that's put in. It's just something we're going to have to live with. We didn't want to go and buy more boards to try and do color matches. At the moment, when you compare it to the teak, it's a very different grain, obviously, but the color kind of flows. So I think it's going to be okay. This is going to be one of those projects we will only know when it's finished about how successful it's been. Another thing we had done with the upper counter, so these are obviously higher than there and carries on at the same height as that. Excuse the mess, we've got everything everywhere because everything's stowed. And we had gone with the teak there because of the nav station and everything. So we did the top upper counters with the teak here. We've still got to finish the fiddles once our splashbacks are put in. This fiddles will obviously be finished off nicely. The splashback will come all the way through there. Got a new tap. We've got our ordinary hot and cold freshwater tap here. And we also put in an additional tap for salt water. Obviously, whilst we're living here and we can fill up our tanks with municipal water and everything, it's very convenient to use the fresh water. When we are living totally off the grid and we're making our own water, fresh water becomes a real premium. So we decided, as do a lot of yachties, to put in a salt water supply at the kitchen sink, galley sink, to rinse dishes and wash hands and all that sort of thing. We then obviously rinse again with the salt water, with the fresh water, but we use a lot of the salt water. Unfortunately, when we bought this tap, I went cheap, and you know what happens when you buy cheap. So just have a look here. We've had a problem with this tap. It's leaked, always leaked around here. It was a domestic tap. It's got a hot and cold feed. Obviously, we've only got one feed coming here, which I think it's just messing with underneath, the connections underneath, and we knew ultimately we needed to change this because we didn't want a big damaged countertop. And I was so chuffed. I went out searching yesterday. It obviously can't be another big sink tap like this because it's just not going to be very pretty. Went out searching all over locally. We don't have a huge selection locally, and was just about to give up when I found a place. And I said to the lady, "We need a tap that looks this shape, but it can't be big, and I don't want a big bulky tap on it because it's actually a secondary sink." She said, "Tap." And she said, "Oh, she thinks she's got something in the storeroom." Went rushing out, came back with this. Apparently it's very old stock, but it was absolutely perfect for us. It's got no tap at the base. The tap actually is on here. It's only a single water feed, so it's perfect. We don't need a mixer. And what's going to be nice is when it's in and we're using it and our hands are wet, we're not putting our hands over the countertops and wetting everything. So I was so excited about that. We are a little concerned in that it's got a good bore. We've got a very strong saltwater pump. And my first thought was to just use one of those water maker type thin taps, and we realized the pressure is going to be bad with that type of very thin bore pipe. So getting this, I thought, oh well, that's great, we've got standard fittings, we shouldn't have a pressure problem. Yesterday we were opening up this tap to see how you change and clean the filter in here, and for some reason this thick pipe reduces to a very small opening here, and I don't know if it's as a water saving thing that they've done that, but it has made us a bit nervous because now we are actually back to our very thin bore tap, which is what we didn't want initially. But we will see. We're going to test it and see. It's still a really nice tap. If it works with our very high pressure water pump, we will use it. Otherwise we're going to have to go back to the drawing board.
At the beginning of the video I alluded to the fact that there was a con with using these 5mm boards. The con is that they are very fragile, so working with them, transporting them is all quite an issue. I did make it very clear to the courier company that they were very fragile and needed to be packed a specific way. They weren't packed accordingly, even against the wishes of the people at Bamboo Warehouse, and needless to say, when they arrived the next day they were broken. Well, 2 of the 3 boards were broken. Thankfully the courier company agreed to pay us back for the boards that were broken. They paid us about 2/3 of what we had paid in total for the boards, and they left the broken boards with us. We didn't want to have to start at square one and order new boards and get them brought up. This courier company, a specific courier company, said that they would not be prepared to bring up new boards for us. So we decided just to work with what we had, and it actually worked out quite well. With a lot of planning, Robin managed to do the cutting layout again and started the cutting. For the bulk of this work we were actually able to be at the dock, which was great because we had to carry the boards on and off of the boat so many times whilst we were doing all the final adjustments that had we been out on the hook it would have been impossible to do. I put a couple of coats of white paint on that ugly brown wall, and then we were ready to start the countertop. About to start the next stage of putting the countertops down. We have sanded the old existing surfaces. We have got Ecoflex 298, which is specifically for sticking wood to wood. We've done the special Sika bond activator. I think we've done everything that we should be doing, and we're about to put down our very first tabletop. So our next stage of the countertops, we've got everything in, and excuse all the dust and mess, it's a constant ongoing job. We are now doing the edges. We have put the little pieces in underneath, like we said we we're going to do. That was pretty much to close up any gap between the tabletop and the cupboards, and it just finishes it off rather nicely, we think. And then Robin has been busy with getting the edges of the countertop back to where they need to be, because when we cut them we overcut them fractionally. He initially thought we would route them, but on second thoughts, with all the corners,
Now we've also got these shadow lines and things, so if a router ran over that it would bump and we wouldn't end up with a perfectly smooth edge. It's been a very painstaking process, but what we've done is he's marked off on tape how much has to be cut back. It really is fractional, and then he literally just hand sands it using a straight edge. Very slow and meticulous. One thing about Robin is he is painfully slow. Some days it's awful to try and watch him work, but it just does always. He ends up with a nice job. So here we've still got to round the corners. That's been a bit of a job because we have to transcribe that above the countertop, allowing the same width overhang that we've left on the two sides. So here is one that we have done already. That's looking pretty good. Just working out the, what do you call that?
Radius.
The radius of the corner. Here's a highly scientific radius. After searching the boat for everything around, the varnish that we're using on the tabletop is, the tin is just the perfect size. And that's what we've been using. The varnishing is going to take a while. We got to do, I'd like to get 4 coats on, 4 over this initial coat, just to make it really hard resistant. We've already messed water, well, we had some water drip on it the other day, and I was really pleased to see that there was no watermark left on it. So I think we've got the right product. It's just a case of getting it on, and it's very fumy. So living in here is going to be a bit of a nightmare. The varnish we're using, the polyurethane that we're using, has a 6 to 12 hour time span between coats at quite a high temperature, and we're pretty cold here. So I need to leave it for definitely the 12 hours between coats, which would put a second coat, if I got the first coat on early in the morning, at night time, and that's just impossible because at night time it's so cold. We've got to have everything closed up, and the fumes in here would make us feel sick and probably kill the cat. So it's down to 1 coat a day, which is going to be a bit slow. So we have finally finished our Galley countertops. A huge project that we have been so looking forward to doing. Taken us 2 years to get to the stage of thinking we could get it done. So it's such a big weight off our minds that it's finally done. We're very happy with how it's turned out. In the beginning we were really worried that it was all going to look like too much wood, but we are pleasantly surprised, and all in all we're quite happy with the whole process. The only thing I have reservations about is the glossiness of the countertops. The varnish I used said matte. There's no ways this is matte, but we will just live with it for a while and see. I think maybe with a bit of time it will dull down a little bit, we're hoping. But a huge project that is now, we can tick it off of our to-do list. So here it is, all complete. The colour has worked out very well with the teak, although a very different grain. I think the fact that the colour blends is rather nice. Some of the details we put in. Got this little fiddle at the back behind the stove here. So that'll be quite a nice little spot. At the moment I keep my chopping boards on there. And then we did a trim where the boards met the walls, so that gave a nice finish across there. Did the same up there. To show you, coming along here we put in
So the splashbacks are great. They really finish it off nicely, and we put in an extra little tiny piece along there that is epoxied in to make absolutely certain that no water, obviously with the dish rack being here, it's a big risk of water ingress, so we wanted to make sure that there was absolutely no way water could get in anywhere along the boards. So everything is sealed really nicely. Here is the new tap that I spoke about in the beginning. So whilst this one is movable, that one unfortunately isn't, but it's small enough that it doesn't get in the way. We've got our freshwater tap, hot and cold. But my pride and joy is our saltwater tap, and it's such a handy tap. And you can see why we were worried about the pressure of our saltwater pump. It really is a very good pressure. So really nice, pleased with that. Got our coffee station up at the top. We keep our cutlery in this section. You'll see we even lined the inside of this cabinet with bamboo so that it all blends nicely. And you'll see the very shiny, supposedly matte tabletops. I'm really hoping our countertops at our house in Ballito, I remember being, they were solid Meranti wood, and I remember being quite surprised at how glossy they were, but with time they dulled down very nicely, so I'm hoping that will be the case here. So that is the galley. And we're feeling like a new pin. It's just so lovely to have nice countertops that I can wash and clean and look pretty, because they weren't very pretty for 2 years we've been living with really ugly countertops. And then across here we've got the counter next to above the fridge. In other island spirits this is the nav station, but it was changed around here, which we're quite pleased about because it gives us a nice countertop there. And again the teak up there, so with the fiddles, which is really nice. So the galley's really come together now too. We've got the details that Robin put in that I showed earlier in the video before they were varnished. That really does finish it off very nicely. We've got our teak air vents, so the air vents really ventilate the cupboards, which is so important on a yacht. So as a whole it's come together, and our very last project with the kitchen with the galley is the pot drawer at the bottom underneath the stove there. We have the door. We're still debating whether to do it as a door for a cabinet or to build a drawer in there to be able to pull out a pot drawer, which is what I'm voting on. Over here we have our gas sensor and solenoid. We have 220 volt a plug there. We are wanting to still put another 220 plug in a countertop one here, because I want to buy a induction cooker, just a single plate induction cooker, which I think is probably, this is going to be the best area to have it next to the gas stove, and with that being our only plug point there, we can't have a cable across, so we're going to rewire and put a countertop plug in there for that. Alright, so that's pretty much the galley and that area. Our next project will be the window frames, as well as a bulkhead that's going to be going up across the top there to close in that whole area, which will have lighting in it. And we will also be doing lighting detail along these areas on the roof that are unpainted still. We are going to be putting probably a perspex fitting across there. Haven't quite decided on the final details yet, but that's going to finish all that off nicely, and we'll be able to get rid of all those exposed wires. And then this section of the boat will really have come together very nicely. I hope you like it as much as we do. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy our videos and want to follow along, please subscribe. Press the little bell button so that you can get notified when we put in new videos. And please put a comment below if you like it, if you see anything you would have changed. We love feedback from our viewers. Thanks so much, and keep well.